In this YouTube, I'm completing our study of the material that has to do with the question of whether matzah is a separate obligation on the Seder night, is separate from the Korban Pesach when there is no Korban, and this is important in the case where there is no Korban Pesach. So to follow along, you'll need to have in front of you the file, is there an obligation to eat matzah apart from the paschal sacrifice, which we began looking at in class. And you should also have the file, is there an obligation to eat matzah apart from the paschal sacrifice, an addendum. So I'm going to start at the beginning of the sugya that we began, which is on page 2. It's source number 7. And we read as follows: Amar Rava, matzah b'zman hazeh d'oraita umaror d'Rabbanan. So there's a biblical obligation, b'zman hazeh, right? And b'zman hazeh means after the destruction of the temple. But maror is only a rabbinic obligation. We talked about how these are ex post facto analyses. Everyone is eating matzah maror at the Seder, and now the question becomes, what is the origin of that obligation? And so now the Bavli asks, "Umayshna maror dechtiv al matzot umrorim." Right, the pasuk says, "Al matzot umrorim yochluhu," and if you turn back to the first page, on the same page, if you look at source number 5, Bimidbar Perek Tet Pasuk Yud Aleph, you will see that this comes out of the narrative concerning the Pesach Sheni, when those in the desert who are Tameh say, why shouldn't we not be able to bring Korban Pesach? And God says, okay, you can bring a Korban Pesach a month later. And concerning that Korban, it says, B'chodesh HaSheni ba'arba yom bein ha'arbayim. In the next month, the second month, on the 14th day, let's say that bein ha'arbayim means dusk. Let's just say that for now. There's a lot of discussion about what it means. And the rabbinic interpretation is not that, but it means any time after noon, or technically 6.5 hours. In other words, noon plus a half hour to make sure that it's truly noon. Past noon, rather. So at that time, Ya'asu oto, you will bring the Korban Pesach, al matzot umrorim yochluhu. You will eat the Korban Pesach together with matzot umaror. So that's the pasuk that the Gemara quotes, but actually, right, the pasuk concerning the Pesach in Exodus 12, Shemot Yud Beit, reads a little differently. That's source 4 at the bottom of page 1. V'achlu et habasar b'layla hazeh sli'ei shu matzot al merorim yochluhu. They will eat flesh on that night, roasted, and difficult to translate, but translate, and matzot, and with maror, they will eat the Korban Pesach. So they will eat it, the Korban Pesach with matzot and merorim. But you can see how the pasuk regarding Pesach Sheni reflects better the language and the syntax. The language al matzot umorim yochluhu reflects more clearly than the little bit problematic umatzot al morim yochluhu in Exodus 12, al matzot morim in Numbers 9:11, Bimidbar Perek Tet Yud Aleph, reflects a little bit better this idea that Pesach is eaten together with matzah and maror. Matzah and maror described the same. Okay, back to the Bavli. So the Bavli says, why is maror any different? The reason for maror not being doraita is because it's described as an accompaniment to the Pesach. Al matzot u'marorim. So the Bavli says, Bizman de'ika Pesach yesh maror, Bizman de'leka Pesach leka maror. And that, what we infer from that phrase, amatzot u'marim, is we need to consume some maror as an accompaniment to the Korban Pesach. So if there's a Korban Pesach, we have to consume maror. If it's not korban pesach, we don't. So then the question is, matzah nami, haktiv al matzot umorim yochlu. Concerning matzah, it also says, al matzot umorim. Matzah is also described as an accompaniment to the korban pesach, and therefore, if there's no korban pesach, there should be no mitzvah to eat matzah. So the Talmud's answer is matzah mihadar hadar beikra. Right, matzah is repeated. Right, the scripture repeats the obligation of matzah. Right, the root hey dalid lamed is like chazar in Hebrew. Right, dalid in Aramaic often corresponds to zayin in Hebrew, and chet and hey often are interchanged. So hey dalid reish is therefore the same as chet zayin reish in Hebrew. So matzah mi hadar beikra, ba'erev tochlu matzot, in that it says you should eat matzah the night of the 14th, in accordance with the biblical notion of how days work. They begin at dawn and end at night, but the night, in other words, now I didn't say it correctly. They begin at dawn, and so the next day doesn't begin till the following dawn, and therefore the erev, the night, which we call the beginning of the 15th for the Torah, is the erev of the 14th. The 14th day extends through the night until the next dawn. Okay, but it says, ba'erev tochlu matzot, which could be read as, you must eat matzah that night when you are eating a korban pesach. And indeed, since we have already been told that you have to eat matzah as an accompaniment to the korban pesach, why are we being told that you need to eat matzah that evening? We already know that. And so, therefore, the Talmud suggests that what the Torah is telling you is that in addition to the obligation to eat matzah together with korban pesach, there's also an obligation to eat matzah that night in and of itself. Whether that's what the Torah means, or as I suggested in class, this is some kind of conflation of Chag HaMatzot and Chag HaPesach, except that here the conflation is such that the Chag HaMatzot actually begins on the night of Chag HaPesach. That may be what it means. Not clear, but we understand how the Talmud understands it. The Torah says twice that you need to eat matzah the night of the Pesach, once as an accompaniment to the Pesach, and once that is mentioned independently. So there are these two obligations. Therefore, if there's no korban Pesach, you still have to eat matzah. There's a mitzvah d'oraita. Okay, back to the sugya. Rav Acha bar Yaakov Amar, echad zeh v'echad zeh d'Rabbanan. Rav Acha bar Yaakov says, no, matzah, like maror, is only a rabbinic obligation after the Korban Habayit when there's no Korban Pesach. So the Talmud says, not surprisingly, Ella, but Haktiv, behold, it is written, Ba'erev tochlu matzot, the pasuk that we quoted to support Rava. Okay. So what does Rav Acha bar Yaakov have to say about that pasuk, which the Talmud says seems to describe a separate obligation to eat matzah, what we call the night of the 15th, which then should continue to apply even when there's no Korban Pesach? Talmud's answer is, Hahi, that verse, Mibaya le litamid shehaya b'derech rechoka. Right, so there's a standard move that the Bavli makes, which is to say that we have psukim, and they are all there to teach us something. When there is a dispute, what sometimes happens is one Amora, or sometimes the Tana, says to the other, you are learning X from that verse. I think that the verse comes to teach something else, and therefore it is not available, so to speak, to teach what you say it teaches. So what is it that Rav Acha Bar Yaakov thinks the pasuk is meant to teach? That pasuk, hahi mibayale, we need it for the case of a tamei shahaya b'derech rechoka, right? Remember someone who is ritually impure, tamei, or is far away from the mikdash, b'derech rechoka, whatever that means, that's a topic of discussion. So regarding them, the salka datach amena, it would have arisen in my mind and I would have said, right, salka, the original expression is salka adatach, it would have been ole al hadat, it would have occurred to you, sorry, I think I said to me, it would have occurred to you, salka datach, amena, as follows, I will say, it would have occurred to you, quote, to say, quote, I will say, Kevan de Pesach lo achle matzo marar nami lo nechal. That since they are tamei and they are b'derech rechokat on the day on which Korban Pesach is supposed to be brought, or night Korban Pesach is supposed to be consumed, they don't offer and consume the Korban Pesach, maybe they shouldn't eat matzah marar either. So, therefore, Ba'erev Tochlu Matzot teaches you that you should eat matzah. Right? Kivan de Pesach lo achli, since you don't eat a Pesach of your Tamei, you also don't eat matzah umaror, that's what I would have thought. Kamashal on this pasuk tells you that you still have to eat matzot. In other words, what we're arguing, even according to Rav Acha Bar Yaakov, is that when there is no possibility of bringing a Korban Pesach, there is no obligation of eating matzah, and we do so only at rabbinic behest. However, at a time when the Korban Pesach is being brought, but because of my personal situation, I am tamei or b'derech rechoka, cannot eat the Korban Pesach, so that night of the 15th, although I am not obligated to eat the Korban Pesach, I can delay my offering and consuming of the Korban Pesach a month to the 15th of Iyar, I still do have an obligation to eat matzah that night because of the pasuk, ba'erev tochlu matzot. Okay. So both agree that sometimes there's an independent obligation to eat matzah. Rav Acha Bar Yaakov says that's only at a time when, in general, Korban Pesach can be offered. And Rabbah says, no, that independent obligation obtains even when it is impossible to bring a Korban Pesach altogether. Okay, and I skipped part of the Gemara. And we have Tanya Kfatei de Rava, standard gambit in the Bavli, to support an Amora's position with a Tanaitic source. Sheishet yamim tochal matzot, uvayom hashvi'i hatzeret lashem elokecha. Okay, so this is verse, where is it now? I'm back on page 1, source number 3. Devarim Perek Tet Zayin Chet, Deuteronomy 16:8. Sheishet Yamim Tochal Matzot, you should eat matzah for 6 days, and then the 7th day is a day of gathering, perhaps. Atzeret can be translated in many ways. But of course, what's notable is that whereas elsewhere we're told that you have to eat matzah for 7 days, here you only have to eat, I'm told that you only have to eat matzah for 6 days. So, the Talmud says, right, what's going on? We have two psukim that contradict each other. So, of course, the rabbinic solution is to say not that they are different sources, but that there's a way of reconciling them. So what is that way? The Braita says, Sheshit yamim tochal matzot v'yom hashvi'i, etc. Only 6 days are you to eat matzah. What does this teach us? Ma shvi'i reshut Av Sheshet Yamim Rishut. By saying Sheshet Yamim, the Torah is telling us you could eat matzah all 7 days of the holiday, but you could eat matzah just 6 days. Why? Because the Torah doesn't mean that you must eat matzah all of those days. But, as we said in class, if you want to eat bread, it must be non-chametz. That's what the Torah is saying. The Torah is saying you may only eat matzah, as opposed to chametz, throughout the holiday, but you need not do so, other than the first night. And the way the Torah conveys this is by saying in one place, eat matzah 6 days, as opposed to 7 days. And now the Braita explains this using an exegetical method that the rabbis use and is included in the list of the 13 exegetical principles attributed to Rabbi Yishmael. So the Talmud says, my tama. Of course, that's not part of the Braita, because that's Aramaic, but often in the Bavli, a declarative statement is turned into a question and answer form, dialectical structure, by adding in words that make what follows an answer to a question. So the question is, my tama, why is that? Or really, how do we learn from this pasuk that all of the days of Pesach matzah is reshut, but you have no obligation to eat matzah except for the first night? How does that work? Havei davar shahaya bichlal v'yatza min hachlal lelamed. So we have something that was included in a larger category, namely one of the 7 days of Pesach. It was included in the statement you should eat matzah for 7 days. V'yatza min haklal lelamed, and it left that general category. Right? It was, in one place, it is described as being outside of that category in the pasuk that says, eat matzah for 6 days, right? By implication, one of the 7 days that we have been talking about elsewhere is outside of the principle that one eats matzah, and it comes lilamed, to teach something. Lo lilamed al atzmo yatza, it doesn't come to teach, I would say, solely about itself. Ela lilamed ala klal kulo yatza, rather, comes to teach us something about the category as a whole. Yachol, and what does it come to teach us? That just as that day is optional in terms of eating matzah, because in one place the Torah says you want to eat 6 days, eat 6 days. You don't have to eat 7 days. So that tells you that that 7th day is optional. That teaches you that all of the days are optional. So the Torah is basically saying 6 days, 7 days, whatever. You don't have to eat matzah during those days. Just don't eat chametz. So the Braita goes on to say, Yachol, right, and that's used in Midrash Halakha to introduce a proposal that will be rejected. It could have been, one could have said, Af Laila Rishon Rishut, that even the first night of Pesach matzah is also optional. Talmud Lomar, right, which introduces the verse which is the basis of the response to the rejection of the previous suggestion. Al matzot umrorim yochluhu. Pasuk says that on that night you have to eat the Korban Pesach together with matzah maror. So clearly the first night there's an obligation to eat matzah. The Braita continues, wait a second. Ein li ela bizman shebeit hamikdash kayam. All I can derive from that pasuk is that there's an obligation to eat matzah first night of Pesach when the temple is in existence. Bizman she'ein beit hamikdash kayam minaim. How do we know that there's an obligation to eat matzah even when there is no Korban Pesach? Talmud Lomar, top of page 3, Talmud Lomar, ba'erev tochlu matzot. Right, quotes the pasuk of Erev Tochlu Matzot, Katuv Kav'o Chova. In this pasuk, the Torah has established matzah as a biblical obligation apart from the Korban Pesach, even when the Korban Pesach cannot be brought, can no longer be brought because there's no temple. Now notice from the point of view, the structural point of view, if you isolate what I call the proto-sugya, you have two Amoraic statements, one by Rava, matzah bisman hazeh doraita maror derabanan, one by Rav Acha bar Yaakov, echad zeh ve'echad zeh derabanan, and then you have at the end of the sugya a braita, and it emerges from that braita that there is an obligation, a biblical obligation to eat matzah, even at a time when the temple is not standing and there is no Korban Pesach. In other words, the braita is supporting the position of Rava, and the rest of the sugya is anonymous, and so it is offering argumentation in behalf of each of the Amoraim, Rava and Rav Acha bar Yaakov, but it is a creation of the Stamaim, whoever composed the anonymous Talmud. Let's follow the consensus that they are post-Amoraic editors. But also notice that the basis that is that when the Talmud says, and it says to Rava, why are you saying that matzah is doraita? After all, the Torah says, al matzot u'morim yochluhu, seems to say that matzah is only biblically required when you have a Korban Pesach. And the answer is, well, there's another pasuk, va'erev tochlu matzot. All the Stam is doing is paraphrasing the Braita, right? But in, right? Because that's exactly what the Braita says. Braita says, A, that there is an obligation to eat matzah the first night of Pesach because of al matzot u'morim yochluhu. B, there is an obligation to eat matzah that night even if there's no Korban Pesach because of ba'erev tochlu matzot. And we find this all the time, that the Stam is taking what Professor Friedman calls samamanim, like ingredients, from earlier sources and constructing a sugya based on those earlier sources. What Rav Acha bar Yaakov would have to say, right, when we would present him with a Tannaitic source that contradicts his position, the Talmud doesn't address that. You know the principle that Amoraim must defer to Tannaim if the Tannaim take a view at variance with their view. Here, in this sugya, that issue is not